Welcome to the Monstrous Electricity Show, which is the almost last event in the Frankenstein celebrations this week, the Frankenweek. We've had a Franken read today that finished at 4 o'clock. Many of you readers are here, so thank you for coming and joining us. And we've got several classes visiting with us today. We've got HS 100, we've got... Hey! We've got the freshman seminar on Frankenstein. Woo! And who else have we got? Have we got Deirdre's class too? Woo! At the back. All right, thank you. So, my name's... And SLS 12. Only one of you? Two of us. Thank you for coming. I'm only going to introduce our primary actors today and to say thank you for joining this Monstrous Electrical Show. I would like to introduce to you, I think perhaps I'll start with the real name, is Dr. Sarah Schechner, who's the Wheatland Curator of the History of Science Historic Instruments Collection, the Putnam Gallery that you often see as you walk out through the Science Centre. Sarah is here today as Dr. Victoria Frankenstein. And her notable assistant from the physics department, Daniel, who is in the role of Igor. Igor or Igor, depends which movie you watch. So Sarah is going to introduce the Historic Instruments Collection in a second. We're going to start with that, and I'm going to hand this microphone over. Thank you.
Okay, let me just turn this off. Got it. Okay, so as you've had one welcome, let me also welcome you to our Monstrous Electrical Show. As you heard, my name is Sarah Schechner, and I'm the curator of Harvard's collection of historical scientific instruments. And I'll be assisted today by a number of people. Daniel Rosenberg, who is in front there, Daniel Davis, who's standing behind, and also Alan Crockett, who isn't in the room right now. He will make an appearance later. Daniel, and Alan are science demonstrators here at Harvard. And today we're going to reenact some of the spooky and shocking experiments that inspired author Mary Shelley in writing Frankenstein, which was published 200 years ago. And as you know, in the book, there is a scientist, Victor Frankenstein. He gets a little mad, but he goes to attend various lectures of natural philosophy and decides that he will use what he's learned and some ideas of his own to animate some body parts he's assembled into a creature. So I am playing the role of Victoria Frankenstein, the deranged sister of Victor, who has recently escaped from an asylum and plans to continue his experiments now that her Victor is dead. Daniel will be my Igor. Daniel will be my other Igor. Alan will be Igor cubed or something. So we'll be playing these roles. During the course of this, we'll be doing a combination of things. I will be showing you authentic instruments from the collection of historical scientific instruments of this period, and a small representative, ones that we could bring into the lecture hall. Others are on display in our Putnam Gallery, which is open on weekdays and Sundays, 11 to 4, so you can see some bigger machines there. or check our database. We'll also be doing demonstrations, hands-on activities to go along with the real things and my slides, using vintage machines and more modern materials that the science demonstrators here have at Harvard, because our instruments are too fragile to use, but these will work much the same way. Okay, so let's begin. I think I'll pick up this large bone here. Igor, I should explain why I'm dressed like this. I needed to put on these men's clothes to help me escape from that horrible madhouse. But I have to say, now that I have them on, I've really found them quite useful for traipsing through graveyards and plundering charnel houses. I mean, look at this specimen. Isn't this, we could really use this. This is something I dug up. Actually, I did dig it up in Newfoundland, but that's another story. I think if Mary Shelley were here, she would appreciate the unconventionality of my attire. But I also want to say that I'm really glad that both of you could be my assistants. My last assistant didn't last so well. He's not that useful anymore unless we need a spare rib or two. He's kind of thinned out. But we're going to go forward, and if we're going to get to work at making a new creature, I think we should begin by reviewing the experiments that lead up to this, so that we know what we'll be dealing with. So I want to talk first about air. Air is important for life, it seems, but how so? And, wait a second. There we go. In the 18th century, there were a lot of experiments with air pumps. And here you see a famous painting by Joseph Wright of Derby showing an experiment with an air pump. And I'm going to, this is kind of a hard scene to dissect, but here is the air pump. And there's a bird cage over here, empty. You'll see that. And if we go to this next slide, we can focus in on this air pump. And you see down here the double barrels that would extract the air from up here, this receiver in which this bird is placed. Now, Joseph Wright's of Derby's painting, he's actually using he's kind of out of date. He's using an older style air pump, much like Francis Hawksby's of 1703. And here you see the receiver like we have here. Here you have the double barrels to extract the air like we have here. But later air pumps, really around the time that this painting was done, looked more like this one here. And and you can see that they've kind of put them all on the same level. This is a little kind of baby air pump. It's a tabletop version. But we have in the collection bigger ones too. But so you have your receiver, and this removes, and you can put in things to test. So maybe we should put in this bird. Let's stick him in there. All right, in you go. So what if we did this experiment, like if we pulled the air out of there, what would happen, do you think? anyone in our audience think what would happen to this bird? I'm sorry? It would explode?
I don't know if it would explode, but it would certainly expire.
Yes. Well, suppose I activate this air pump a bit, and let's see what happens. Okay. Well, do you think he's dead or just resting?
He is an ex-bird.
He's an ex-bird. So one thing you probably are thinking is, well, we take out the air, the bird can no longer breathe. And that is true. So there's something in our air. We might not yet know what it is.
Vital principle.
A vital principle or something that is necessary for life in terms of respiration. But are there other effects that this bird has by the air changing in that chamber?
Well, we can find out. Because I have an air... Wow, this is loud.
So we have another air pump over here.
I have an air pump here, a more modern version. And I have a stand-in for... birds. First, we're going to try the experiment with marshmallows.
With the marshmallows.
Because we know what marshmallows do. Marshmallows.
I get hungry during these experiments. Where's that bone?
Oh.
This particular one, I don't know. It's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. But you will see that they often have attached to them a mercury barometer so that you could measure the pressure inside the chamber. I don't know. I'm blanking on the number right now.
Is my guess, just from it would be a diaphragm pump. It wouldn't be an oil pump. So that's probably more like about 1/100th of an atmosphere. I don't think it would be down to thousandths or.
Yeah. There would be some.
As opposed to this bad boy, which.
Yeah. This is a more powerful one.
Back from the future with a vacuum pump. So, marshmallows are full of air. That's why they're so lovely and squishy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on this vacuum pump, and I'm going to pull the air out of the chamber. So we're going to see something happen, and then we're going to leave the vacuum pump connected for a little while and see how that something evolves. Because air is going to keep coming out of this system. And it happens fast. Oh. There's a certain relaxation after the initial swelling. We're pumping air out of these marshmallows. And now the question is, what is inside of the marshmallows where the air once was? And what happens when I let the air back into the chamber?
Ooh. Yes. All right, now for our bird.
Now for the bird. Oh.
We have for this dastardly experiment. Oh, we're going to do the little monsters first.
I'm going to build a stack. Why not?
Okay. So we have here some Frankenstein heads, some little ghosts, and some Peeps chicks.
Peeps. All right. Let's hope they're still fresh. Whoa. They don't relax quite as much, do they? I wonder what will happen to them, though, when we let the air back in. Sad ghost.
Yeah, that.
So we've seen what happens when we let the air back in. But what if we start with the air on the outside and we take away the air on the inside directly with the vacuum pump? And I have here a bog standard 55-gallon drum. Oh. Just in case you were wondering whether it was made out of aluminum foil or anything, when you see what happens. I think we're all at a safe distance. So this drum is 11 inches in radius. It's about 30 inches tall, 32 inches maybe. So if you square 11 and multiply it by pi, and then double that for the top and the bottom, and then you multiply the circumference by the height, you'll find that the air pressure on the inside and the outside right now is 5 tons pushing down, 5 tons pushing up, and 12 tons pinching in. And the only way to access that kind of force is to remove the force on the inside, which is easy enough to do. So this might take a minute. Top, bottom.
You know, and you might think that the pressure that we live in is like nothing, you know. Birds fly through it, but our bodies are used to it. And so
Because
now
we have it on the inside of us as well as on the outside of us.
right.
So you see, the first thing that happened was the squish. It pinched it into a triangle. But if we let the pump keep going, you'll see that, in fact, that was just the initial collapse. And that by removing more air, you can see the atmosphere, like a giant pair of hands, is continuing to crush the drum down. There, nice. We can use it as a side table.
Yeah.
But wait, perhaps if I let the air pressure back in, it will reinflate? So that is what we can do with the living power of the air pump.
So I guess air is important to us in two ways as we're going to reanimate a body. We need to be conscious of the pressure on these body parts and inside the parts. We also need to think about the air for respiration. But you could go further and swap bell jars on your electrical machine and take a bell jar like this and put it on. This one, as you can see, has a stem that comes out. There's a hook. It's metal. We could stick something on there. Well, we could put our bird on the bottom there and stick him in. And now we could not only play with the air in the pump, in the bell jar, but we could shock this creature with electricity. So I think we're going to now look at electrical matter. And I'm just going to shift this down a little out of the way so that our bell jars don't get in the way here. And our little bird can go too. So what is electrical matter at the time that Shelley is writing? Well, we can't see it. It's seen as subtle, weightless. It's seen as an element of nature. We don't create it, but we can force it to reveal itself through friction on glass and other things. So to review what people know about electricity of this time and to revisit some of the experiments, let's look at this. So it's 1700. If you wanted to demonstrate electrical phenomena, this was all you needed. A lump of amber and a cat. Now, finding a cat and rubbing it with amber, when you did that, you found that the amber would then attract little bits of like strings and pieces of paper, this so-called electric attraction. And you might even hear little sparks, but that's kind of inefficient, and it's always hard to get a cat. So you can have a dead cat or a rabbit skin, and quickly, they realized by rubbing not just amber, but glass rods or rods of sealing wax, rubbing that on with the fur, one could then hold it near things and see electrical phenomena. And so they began with that, and they developed a more efficient way. I mean, okay, so rubbing stuff like this, it's takes time. But Francis Hauksbee, whose air pump we saw earlier, while rubbing the outside of it kind of to clean it, he noticed that he was generating electrical phenomena on the outside and inside of his pump, and he invented a kind of electric machine where they spun a globe, like the sphere of the pump, and rubbed it against a cushion. Later, after realizing they didn't have to rub a sphere or a cylinder of glass, they went to this kind of machine in the 18th century, a plate electrical machine. So by rotating this handle, it causes this glass disc to turn, and there are these leather cushions here that are pressing the disc gently and doing the rubbing, the same rubbing that I would have been doing here with a rod and cat fur. But now it's more efficient. And we have these these brass conductors that have little teeth that are taking the electrical material, whatever that may be, off of the plate and transferring it, conducting it along these tubes, which are insulated because they're mounted on glass rods. So there's this discussion of, well, what will this electricity do? So first things, early experiments involve things like this. Well, here we're still rubbing the glass rod. You see the boy who's dangling. He's got a conducting rod in his hand over here. And it's traveling down a chain to a ball here, and little bits of paper are flying up to greet it. And he himself is being a conductor. His body can conduct the electrical fluid. And here is the experimenter's hand. He's taken his glass rod, he's rubbed it up with his cat fur or rabbit fur. He's applying it to the boy, and the dangling boy is now part of the electrical apparatus. Well, this experiment with the dangling boy was performed here in Boston in Faneuil Hall in 1743. And one of the people who saw it was this fellow, Benjamin Franklin. The experiment was performed by this fellow named Archibald Spencer. And Franklin saw it, and he said, wow, that's interesting, these experiments with electrical matter and electrical machines, not just dangling boys. And he went home to Philadelphia and returned. He returned there and began his own electrical experiments in 1745. And so he said, well, I'm not going to keep rubbing glass rods with fur. He's going to make use of an electrical machine similar to what we have here, though his personal one had a globe that was rubbed rather than a plate. But others did use plates like this. And he also made use of a new invention, which was called the Linein Jar. And let me just grab one here. So as you generate this electrical matter coming off of here, you want to, you can take it to something else. I guess I need another glove here. Here's a Linein jar. Let me just grab another glove so I can hold it properly. Here it is. Thank you. Because this is one of our early ones. A lot of these instruments were used here at Harvard for teaching at the time that in the 18th and early 19th century. So here's a Linein jar. We're going to demonstrate it in a moment. So it's a glass jar. It's coated on the inside and outside with a kind of metal foil. That can vary. There's a chain to make a contact from this conductor at the top, which goes through a wooden lid, and the chain connects the bottom. And say I want to charge this, I would use this discharger, which is just another brass arc on an insulated glass handle, and I could connect to these and draw the electrical matter into the jar. And then what this was good for is it allowed you to store electricity and build up its power. When you put a bunch of these jars together, like you see here in this little example, you had a battery. That's what a battery was. It's called a battery because Franklin came up with this term because by lining up all these Linein jars like soldiers in a row, like a Roman military battery, you could then have the force, the power of the electricity magnified, multiplied by, instead of one jar, 4 jars. And each of these jars are interconnected both in the box and out, and then can be used for experiments. So we're now going to turn it back to Igor here.
Thank you, Doc.
And we're going to demonstrate the mysterious invisible matter of electricity and have some demonstrate what with the modern things or the vintage things. Some of these are like 100 years old over there, but these, you'll see the examples here.
So we use a plate machine. This is a Wimshurst machine. It was invented around 1840. So it's a little bit after the time of Franklin and his experiments. But it's a little bit more efficient. It's an induction machine. It doesn't use friction. It uses electrical induction. It pushes charge from the front plate to the back plate and stores it in 2 Leiden jars in the back. So this is already sort of the composition to make a spark, and it's turning mechanical energy of this hand crank through a leather belt, a couple of pulleys. Okay.
Okay, so electricity, it makes light, it makes sound.
But what else can it do?
Yes, what else can it do?
Well, we're going to see a phenomenon that is called the electric wind. And I'm connecting one side of the electrical machine to the table, or ground, and to the other side of the electrical machine to this whirligig, which is sitting on a compass needle point. And I'm going to apply the electric fluid to it. And electrical fluid likes to flow off of the end of points. And so you can see that with the points,
Oh, we're getting another effect.
and we're getting another effect. These are, the sound that you hear are Franklin's bells. And that was, in Benjamin Franklin's house itself, was a connection to the roof and a connection to the ground. And in between them were a set of bells with a little ball of pith that would move back and forth when there was a charge in the air. And so by spinning the electric wind, I'm also putting charge up on this. So let's see, I can ground it, stop it. So this ringing, the bell ringing would tell Franklin or whoever had a set of electrical bells in their house when a thunderstorm was approaching, because the electric field in the air would cause the bells to ring. So
we see the points, this thing is caused to spin just by the electric matter coming off the ends of those points and causing it to spin, but yet we're not touching it. By the way, here are some earlier electric bells that are hung on a big conductor for this kind of experiment in the olden days.
let's see. So you saw the spark that we made just by having these two Leiden jars connected. What I'm going to do now, actually, if Daniel can crank the crank, is I'm going to see what the spark looks like when we charge up this, and hold on, ooh. This is a Leiden jar. This is one of our modern lecture demonstration Leiden jars. It's actually a dissectable Leiden jar, which you can take apart to show that the charge doesn't actually reside on the metal. It's part of the... It's okay, get used to that. We'll see. Okay, so I now have the ground. Daniel is charging up. You hear the sparkles. So you can see that the spark is a little bit sort of stronger and fatter and louder and brighter. This is because we're charging up a much bigger Leiden jar. And this would be the Okay. This is one the size that knocked Ben Franklin out one time when he was doing his experiments. What I learned from I.B. Cohen's book. Okay. Everything is short. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So before we demonstrate this, let me say a few words. So if you look in the picture, the portrait I have here, you see Franklin looking at his electric bells. And what he's done is he's put a lightning rod up on his roof, and it's and another wire. So it's the points on the roof are sensing the atmosphere. And as a storm cloud would go by or the weather would change, certain changes, like particularly a storm cloud, would cause the bells to sense the atmosphere and ring. And one of the important discoveries of Benjamin Franklin was that lightning was electrical. And and you see it, just reference to this in the back through this window scene of lightning coming down and hitting things. And so he invented the lightning rod. So he said, well, if you had a lightning point on your house, and it would draw off, that point would draw off the electric matter, whatever that was, it's still up to debate, would draw it off from the atmosphere and travel it down through a wire to the ground, as long as it's grounded. And the house, if it even was struck by lightning, would be protected. So at the time he's writing this, there are a lot of like buildings with steeples, like churches or trees that would get struck by lightning, and people in them or standing under them would get electrocuted. And so there was a campaign to put lightning rods on things, and what we're going to show here is actually a replica of one of the instruments in our collection that was made in 1789, but we have others. And this was to demonstrate the value of lightning rods, because not everyone was convinced. In fact, Harvard wasn't completely convinced until 1768, when Hollis Hall was struck by lightning. And bricks fell off, and students jumped out of their chairs, and no one was killed. But after that, it became part of the responsibilities of the professor of mathematics and natural philosophy, John Winthrop, and then his successors, to install lightning rods on Harvard buildings. So this is one model of, we have earlier ones and later ones in the collection. I'll just show you this one before we demonstrate with the replica. So the idea of these was you had a lightning rod. You could check it with balls on top, whether there was a debate whether blunt was better than points. And you would put in it gunpowder. And so if everything's grounded, the lightning goes right through and nothing happens. Your house stays just fine. But if it's not grounded, then the whole thing collapses and the gunpowder goes off. So we propose, Igor here, and Igor too, to demonstrate this for you. And I'm going to just move these things out of the way, maybe.
It's just a model.
Yeah.
So it's a model of a church, actually. One of the little pieces of theological logic at the time was that God would not use lightning, the punishment of the gods, to strike his own house of worship. So frequently, powder stores would be kept in churches, which also frequently were the tallest buildings in a town. I've started this thunder house off with a bit of a ground wire. So right now, the top of the steeple is connected to the ground on the outside. So this is the equivalent of having a lightning rod in place. And so we're going to tempt fate and see if we can't actually stop. I see we're getting a discharge to the ground. Let's move it out just a couple inches. That's good. Okay, one more time with feeling. Perfectly safe. Okay, so I like doing these with Franklin's bells.
Yeah, that's great.
Let us know. So now we've gone back in time to a moment before the lightning rod was in place. And Daniel will crank it up till we have some signs of electrical power.
So now the lightning rod is not grounded.
Woo!
All right. So now we're going to talk about what happens with living things when you charge them.
Oh.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, our friend.
Let's not do the jumping ring. We're kind of, I don't know, are we short on time? Should I bring that back in? Because we forgot to do the...
the chain of people and everyone act as a frog.
Do we want to do that?
Okay, so
Daniel, stop.
I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to talk for a moment.
Sure.
So, okay. So our friend here, Ben Franklin, he wrote to Harvard's professor of natural philosophy, John Winthrop, with instructions on how to make an electrical battery. And he said, "Pray, take care how you expose your head to an accidental stroke. For I can assure you from experience, one is sufficient to knock a stout man down, and I believe a stroke from 2 or 3 in the head would kill him." Well, so electricity can kill. Certainly lightning strikes do kill. But how can electricity animate life? So we're now going to turn to this fellow, Luigi Galvani, who in 1780 began experiments with frogs. And I've set up here, you'll see one of his demonstrations, and you'll see he has a machine much like this, and he has we'll see Linein jars like this with frogs' legs dangling on them, and he'll be using a discharger like this. And so what he found was he took like a dead frog, and here's my dead frog, okay. And he found that if he had applied the discharger to, say, a muscle in the frog's leg and a nerve, that the legs would twitch. Now, what was this and why? So I have a little video here to demonstrate this. Oh, hang on. Let it just start itself for a moment. Okay. Oh, hang on. My gloves are making a problem for me here. Oh. Now my hand is wet. Comes with music even.
Con tu manito júntalo las patitas. Ahora pon músculo, músculo. Los dos
So we'll just watch about a minute of this. So you see they were applying electrical contacts or just metal probes to different parts of the frog. And it causes it to twitch. See if it'll do it once more. Okay, we'll stop it there. So let me just go on to the next slide. The muscles get tired, and so they is not as reactive the longer you try this experiment. But here you see one of Galvani's experiments. I tried to set it up over here with a Linein jar similar to what our collection with our little frog's legs dangling. So he did a whole bunch of these experiments, and here's another plate, and you'll see all the different, you'll see the hand with the discharger making connections between different parts of the frog and getting it to twitch. He concluded from this that there was some kind of animal electricity inside the frog's muscle, that this was a vital part of what life was, and that he was tapping into that. Even though the frog was dead, it still had this vital electrical matter in it. So I thought what we could do here, we were not able to bring a frog in, so that's why I showed you our demo on video. But it also demonstrates how much how much the body can conduct electricity and how fast it travels through it. And so there was a classic experiment, even before Galvani, to show this, which was to make a chain of people who are then connected up to the electrical machine, and everyone will feel the electricity quickly go through them, and spectators will see it. So I would call on volunteers from the audience, not if you have a pacemaker, please. It is otherwise safe. I will volunteer, and we'll have a chain of people to hold hands, and we're going to show this, and we can all be like jumping frogs to reenact it.
I've done it before, so I'm still here.
All right. So
Earlier, but
okay, so someone has to
on your right.
be down on this end
There we go.
and touch
So let's
touch that. So you grab that.
You're going to have
Let's
to.
bring the,
You're going to have to make a
Luke
circle.
has to
You're going to have to.
close.
You're
You
going
need
to have to
to
touch,
join
join
his.
hands
Yeah,
over there.
sure. So we got another one here.
So it's
Okay.
a chain of I wouldn't say a chain of fools, but you guys be the judge.
Okay. Ready? Did you feel it?
Oh yeah.
One more. There, everybody
Thank
jumped.
you. So thank you to my volunteer frogs
Thank you.
and to Igor over there. So Galvani was busy with his frogs and hooking them up to all sorts of things and seeing what would happen. And his nephew, this fellow here, Giovanni Aldini, made galvanism a focus of his research. And he took advantage of a new electrical invention, the voltaic pile, which was a new form of battery that Galvani didn't have access to. Here is a voltaic pile from our collection. And what it is it's a series of discs of different metals, such as copper and iron or copper and zinc, interspersed with cardboard that's been soaked in a kind of salty solution. And what happens is there's a really nice example, a beautiful one, in the Putnam Gallery. You'll see it up here. And you'll see, like in all his pictures, these voltaic piles. What they do is it provides what we now call current electricity. Up until Volta invented this in 1800, drawing on a bit of debate with Galvani, in fact, who was only able to use Leiden jars and batteries of that sort for his work. Volta's battery here provides continuous current, and it can be more powerful than just a spark or a discharge from a Leiden jar. So Aldini had a kind of showmanship, and he had kind of a traveling show demonstrating experiments on animal parts, like you see here with where he's cut off the head of an ox and he applies electrodes to it and finds that the tongue twists and the eyes roll back and the animal grimaces. Here he's even incorporated a little frog leg too. I'm not quite sure why, but it's certainly dramatic. In 1802, he did his first experiments on human corpses. Here he's got the decapitated heads of 2 brigands, and as you'll see, like here, he's linked them up, and he's got his connectors, his discharger, going from one to the other, and another part going to the voltaic pile. Here he's connecting from one brain to, it looks like an ear or another brain, and he's doing all sorts of experiments with these bodies and electricity, and he makes the faces grimace, and arms would rise in the air from their torsos, and it was quite a spectacle. But his pièce de résistance, his most notable event, was in London in 1803, where he galvanized the corpse of George Forster, who was an executed murderer. So what he did was the guy is hung, and as soon as he's dead, he gets him off the gallows and takes him into a study. And more like the prior picture, not so much like this cartoon of it from 1836, but it gives a sense of it. He electrifies the body, and the jaw began to quiver. It's reported in the news. The adjoining muscles were horribly contorted, and the left eye actually opened. The back arched, his fists punched the air, and the legs kicked violently. Now, Aldini's purpose, it seems, was mainly to see how electricity might resuscitate someone who has just had a drowning or some other accident. It's not long dead. You may be kind of like we would say CPR or defibrillating or something like that in modern terms. He wasn't so much interested, I think, in animating the dead, but others took this further. And this is an experiment much talked about. As you can see here, even in 1836, they're still making cartoons on it. You have the two devils here, and one is saying, oh, we've lost him, the body is now back to living. And the other is saying, no, not yet, because we'll still get him in the end. And this is another version of the voltaic battery, now with plates lined up in a box. And you see the wires going to the corpse. Now, these experiments impressed themselves on Mary Shelley. And just to conclude this line of thinking, I just want to say, so she wrote her book in 1816, but and published in 1818. That same year, almost 200 years from today, almost, in November 4th, 1818, this Scottish chemist named Andrew Urey performed a gruesome experiment for students, doctors, and spectators. And he linked up a corpse, again, of a recently executed criminal, and who had just been killed minutes before. And he connected him to a voltaic battery, and he resurrects him, so to speak. This fellow, Matthew Clydesdale, his cadaver twists and jerks. The fingers appeared to point towards spectators who feared he had come back to life. So this was in the air, this idea of using this phenomenon of electricity, which is still kind of very mysterious, to animate body parts. So now what I'd like, we're going to do we're going to look forward now in time to use, since Shelley's day, there are newer, more powerful electrical machines, such as the Van de Graaff generator, which is still a friction machine like the plate glass machine or the Wimshurst, and then the Tesla coil over here. And we're going to do some of the similar experiments with them, and also reenact some of the big horror film stuff, because we can, and it's fun.
So we're going to make some sparks. The nice thing about this machine is that we can switch the polarity, so we can have it be the dome be positive or negative, and that allows us to show one of the sort of basic electrical demonstrations that positive charge is attracted to negative and vice versa. So these are the sparks that the machine generates in the positive sense. It's a little bit wimpier on the negative sense, but still, getting hit by an 1.5 inch of spark is still something. So I'm going to use these balloons so you can see that the balloons are all charged are all charged the same, and they're being repelled from the machine. Now when I switch the polarity, they all run in and switch it again. Whoa! Again, it's alive! Thank you for moving. Woo.
Yeah.
Okay. The Van de Graaff.
So,
if you don't have to leave the loudest and...
Wait a second. Wait. Are we going to make someone's hair stand on end?
Are we going to make someone's hair stand on end?
Who wants to volunteer to have... We need someone with long...
We need someone with long hair, I'm
long
afraid.
hair.
You have long hair.
Yeah. Oh, I have audience volunteer. Here we go.
All right.
So this is the same phenomena That was with the balloons, but it's now going to happen with your hair.
So only
So
stand in the
as
middle,
the
do not
charge
step
comes
either
on and there's like charge, it will repel.
Okay. Now put your hand on the bell.
Do I take off
No.
the ring? No.
You don't have to. And once I get it going, leave your hand on it until I turn it off.
Okay.
And kind of shake your head and you know move it around. Yeah, exactly. And hair raising experiment. Take one.
Oh, I see something happening.
Give it a couple good shakes. Yeah, we see it. Okay, you're good. Thank you.
Okay.
And now, the pièce de résistance, a musical Tesla coil constructed by our very own Daniel Davis. This is one of those things that you just want to reach out and touch.
But shouldn't.
No what?
So I think I would explain what it is, if you could, just how it's, because it is different from these rubbing. You see like images of these Tesla coils in the old horror films or things that are trying to mimic them.
So the Tesla coil is an induction machine, meaning that there are currents that move in the outer coil down below, back and forth. Those changing currents make changing magnetic forces that induce currents in the inner coil. So we have many charges with lower energy moving back and forth in a lower coil that make magnetic forces that move fewer charges, but with much greater energy back and forth in an inner coil. Now that's the principle behind a transformer. A Tesla coil is a resonant transformer, which means that energy is stored in magnetic fields with currents going through the wires and in electric fields with charges stored on capacitors, the cylindrical discs underneath. That energy is exchanged at a characteristic frequency, much like pushing someone on a swing. And as you all know from pushing someone on a swing, if you push at exactly the right rate, the amplitude gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the case here with the Tesla coil until the electrical forces are so intense at the tip of the aluminum rod that they make a spark. The charge moving through the air heats up that air, causing it to expand. That pushes on other air, that pushes on your ears, and makes a bang. So if we just made one spark, you would just hear a pop. If we make the sparks more and more rapidly, however, you get to a point where your ear and brain can't resolve the individual pops. And so just like hearing or seeing continuous motion from a series of images, you hear a continuous tone. And we can modulate that tone to tempo to play music. So remember, there are no speakers. The sparks are the speakers, and you're about to listen to musical thunder. Again, it's rather loud, so you want to cover your ears.
That's an interesting glove, Igor. Can we dim the lights? Here we go. Yeah, isn't that great? So I want to thank you all for coming. If you want to come up and look at things a little more closely, feel free. Or ask, Daniel Davis made this Tesla coil and programmed it to play this music, so it's quite impressive. And I want to thank Igor and Igor, Daniel and Daniel. And thank you for coming.